Good morning, dear learners. Welcome to Teaching Learning. And that one should compare and contrast yeah, one culture with the another culture. And Leela Dubey used that comparative method, right, to bring the insight of different culture to explain the position of women in different culture. How what is the family moved from one place to another place, or different. The family moved to the different places. Family life had a greater impact on her life. Leela Dubey was impacted by her family as well as by the nationalist movement, right? So family had a great impact on her life or on her work. In her family setup, girls were brought up affectionately, and school education for girls was taken for granted. And depending upon the individual's interest, and inclination, entering college and university to work life possibilities. Even at that time, right, there are in her family, that primary education or the school education was compulsory for girls in her family, and as per the interest and of individual, if the girls want, they can enter into the universities or colleges as per their caliber and interest. An independent career was not considered important. Education was important for a certain class status and in case of any contingency. So they were not very inclined towards the working of a girl, but as per the family rules or as per the family perception, that education is important. Education was important. It was important for the contingency or the or for a certain class status. Marriage was considered extremely important for women. Although the family of Leela Dubey emphasized on the education, but for them that career was not that important. But as per the family of Leela Dubey, the marriage was extremely important. They considered that marriage was extremely important, especially for women. Most of the women got married by the age of 20. The women who remained unmarried were either responsible for taking care of their family or were involved in the nationalist movements. Leela grew up at the time when the nationalist movement was at its peak. Many of her family members, including her father, were in British services, which embarrassed her as she felt drawn to the movement. She did not actively participate in the movement but followed the some of the tenets such as India Made and attended some of the meetings of Quit India movement. As his father was in government service, he was associated with the judiciary. So although Leela Dubey was affected by or was impressed by the nationalist movement, but she could not participate in that movement directly because of her father and her father's job and jobs of other family members. But even if she was not able to participate in those movements directly, but she followed some of the tenets or the rules of those movements, right? So she was exposed to regular reading of Hindu texts like Ramcharitramanas and other good Marathi and Bengali literature, right? And she was influenced by the Marx, and she read the stories or the word classics related to the she read the word classics related to the Marxism. Availability of different literature at home and reading extensively developed her analytical and the critical skills, which were to help her later in her work. Because of the family environment, they all were educated in her family, and they, there were the different type of literatures available at her home, and this reading of the different literature has extensively developed her analytical and critical skills, and which helped her in her professional life. The literature that she read and heard about talked about the women in different ways, the ways in which they face difficulty, status within the marital relationships, tasks they should follow, and so on. And because of these literature which she read or heard, right, all those literature talked about the women in the different ways. In Ramcharitra Manas, the women were portrayed in a different way, and another literature, in some other literature city, there she met Shama Charan Dubey. Shama Charan Dubey is again an Indian, eminent Indian anthropologist, sociologist. She met Shama Charan Dubey, S.C. Dubey, and after meeting S.C. Dubey, they got married with the consent of the families, and through her marriage, she was introduced to anthropology as a subject, right? She collected data for her husband, S.C. Dubey's work, and worked as an assistant researcher before branching out on her own. Right, as I told you, S.C. Dubey is one of the eminent anthropologists of India, and Leela Dubey, the actor, worked as the wife of S.C. Dubey, worked as an assistant researcher for S.C. Dubey, and she used to collect the data for S.C. Dubey's work, and then she started her own research. Her first journey in anthropology was through engagement with her husband's work with the Kumars, where she worked on to obtain commerce. I'm sorry, with the commerce, where she worked on to obtain commerce women some information on essential feminine matters. As S.C. Dubey was working on commerce women, and her first journey in anthropology started when she helped S.C. Dubey in collection of some of the data related to the feminine matters from the commerce women. Right, this is how her journey as an anthropologist started. Subsequently, she started work on her own dissertation related to women amongst the Gonds of South Chhattisgarh. She worked in the Sagar University from 1957 to 1975. She was associated with ICSSR in different capacities as fellow, collecting the data, or acting as a associate research, or as a research associate for S.C. Dubey, where she helped S.C. Dubey for the collection of the data. Then she started her own work, and she worked her dissertation. She started her dissertation work, and it is about the produced landmark report towards equality. So her studies, her journey towards the studies of women started when she was nominated as a member of the National Committee Status of Women, right, and by the government of India, and this committee produced the landmark report towards equality. She was also chair of 10th International Congress of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences. As an important office bearer, she organized a symposium along with others, which was published later as a book, Visibility and Power: Essay on Women in Society and Development, in 1986. So she was appointed as a member of the National Commission of Women, and that committee has produced a landmark report towards the equality. Then she chaired the 10th International Congress of Anthropology and Ethnological Sciences, and she was an office bearer, and she organized the symposium, right? She published the book, right? That is Visibility and Power, that is Essay on Women in Society and Development, in 1986, right? Her journey started as an associate, research associate, and then she had the various important positions community as a vice president of International Women's Anthropology Conference, chairperson of the Commission on the Women's of International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, and other honorary positions. So during her life, she held various other important and honorary positions in various organizations. She remained wedded to the qualitative approach, combining careful attention to ethnographic details with insightful interpretation of the same to bring to life, as it were, the richness of interpersonal relationship in setting of household, the family and larger kinship and the decent group. So she adopted the qualitative methods for her studies, right? And she combined this qualitative approach with ethnographic details, and she interpreted it in a way that brings the actual picture to the readers or to the audience, right? She considered gender studies as her major field in the last 2 decades of her life, right? So in last 2 decades of her life, she studied about the gender. She was influenced by the work of Iravati Karve in the areas of family, kinship and gender. In the course of her career, she won several awards. What are the central ideas of Leela Dubey? Leela Dubey's work presented the interface between gender and kinship. So her work is basically presents the interface between the gender and the kinship. She tried to explain the gender and the kinship and the family system. During 1960s and 70s, women studies scholars did not take into account anthropological or ethnographic materials, and anthropology described family and roles of women without questioning them. Right? It was Leela Dubey who bridged these fields, catalyzing the development of gender and kinship studies in India. Right. So in 1960s and 70s, right, the women studies scholars, what they do, they did not take part into account anthropological ethnographical material, and anthropology described family and roles of women without questioning them, without questioning women, right? In 1960s and 70s, women studies scholar were doing this thing, right? It was Leela Dubey who bridged these fields, catalyzing the development of gender and kinship studies in India. Dubey's research and field experience among shifting cultivators, that is Kamars in Andhra Pradesh, settled agricultures, that is Gond in Chhattisgarh, and in a multi-caste village with Rajput as a dominant caste in western UP, gave her a sense of sweep of patrilineal kinship despite of variation across caste, class, tribe, and region. Right. So she started, as we know that she started as a research associate. She collected the data from the commerce for SC Dubey, right? So her field work experiences includes the that is the experiences among the shifting cultivators. The commerce were the shifting cultivators. Then there were this her dissertation was on the Gonds, right? That they were the Gonds were settled agriculturalists, and then she studied about the multi-caste village, especially in the western UP, and that was dominated by the Rajput caste. What she observed that she observed that there is a sweep of a patrilineal kinship despite of their variation across the caste, whether it's a shifting cultivator, whether it's a settled agriculturalist, or whether it's a multi-caste village, there is a sweep of patrilineal kinship, right? Despite of the variation across the caste, class, tribe, region, anything. Her work on matrilineal and Islam, that is Lakshadweep Island, not only provided a glimpse of different set of life trajectories for women under a different kinship system, but drove her to take a traditional anthropological exposition on matrilineal puzzle. She worked even on the matrilineal society that is in Lakshadweep Islands, right? In Lakshadweep Island, there is a map of a different state of life trajectory for women, right, under different kinship systems. So she studied the status of women in patrilineal society as well as in a matrilineal society. Towards equality, if you remember that this report was given by the committee of that is the women committee, which was appointed by the government of India. The invitation to be a part of committee on the status of women, which was involved in writing towards equality report, was an important catalyst in the life and work of Leela Dubey, right? She was the member of the committee, right, which was invited to be involved in writing a report that is named towards equality, right, and it worked as a catalyst, important catalyst in the life and work of Leela Dubey. Important publications in the field of anthropology of women had begun to make an appearance. So it was a catalyst towards the equality, is a catalyst in the work of Leela Dubey, and important publications in the field of anthropology of women had begun to make an appearance. These writings advocated an urgent need to recognize women's lives and situation as a legitimate area of ethnographic inquiry, questioning too and the misconceptions and misrepresentations of women in the discipline and beyond. So, as per these reports, that is towards the equality, named towards the equality, this advocated an urgent need to recognize the women's lives and situation as the legitimate area of ethnographic inquiries. So it is so this for the first time, right? This report advocated that it is important that the lives and the situation of the women should be studied properly, right? Academics into productive dialogue with the global community of the second wave, right? We know that the eras of 70 is the era of feminism. So this report brings the Indian women, or brought this reports brought the Indian women activists and academics into productive dialogues, right? The 10th International Congress of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, held in Delhi in 1978, provided the occasion for Leela Dubey. Leela Dubey was the chairperson of the Commission on Women of International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences to frontally address the issues of neglect of women in mainstream anthropology. So, during the 10th International Congress of Anthropology and Ethnography, Leela Dubey, right? Leela Dubey addressed the issues of the neglect of women in mainstream anthropology. Another important transformation in her work came with the supervision of A.R. Kutty's work on him. She was fascinated by the combination of Islam, considered to be an essential patriarchal religion, within the matrilineal descent system. This research gave insight about how women gain more power in matrilineal system, even situated within the patriarchal religion. So she studied the situation of women in patriarchal society as well as in matrilineal society, and she was that. She studied about the Lakshadweep women's, right, that is they follow the matrilineal society. She was fascinated during her studies. She was fascinated by the combination of Islam, right, within the matrilineal descent, right? Because in Lakshadweep they follow the matrilineal, but the population, majority of population of Lakshadweep follows Islam. So, although Islam is considered to be a patrilineal religion, and they follow the matrilineal system. Lakshadweep follows the matrilineal system, and this research of her gave insight about how women gain more power in a matrilineal system, even situated in the patrilineal religion, right? So according to Leela Dubey, in matrilineal system women gains more power, right, even if it is situated within the patrilineal religion. The information about the region and their practices was based on the compromises, Devolution and Disposal of Property in Matrilineal Muslim Society, published in 1994. So, she collected the information about the region, about their practices, and this information was based on the ethnographic research, right, and on the basis of the interviews. And in her article, that is article on conflict and compromise, that is devolution and disposal of property in matrilineal Muslim society, and this article was published in 1994. And for this she collected the data, right, by the through the based on the ethnographical research and on the basis of interviews, right? Women and kinship. Leela Dubey considered the study of kinship important in studying gender, as it provided as an appropriate context for understanding the gender in society. So, as per Leela Dubey, it is very important to understand the kinship system of the society if one wants to understand the gender, or if one wants to study about the gender of the society. So, for studying gender, it is important to understand the kinship system, right? Because this kinship system provides an appropriate context for understanding the gender in society. The alliance of gender and kinship, which she believed lay at the core of project of feminist anthropology, was virtually preordained. Dubey favored the comparative method used in anthropology, and it was evident in UNESCO sponsored survey reports, studies of women in Southeast method, and this method is evident in the UNESCO sponsored report, and the report was on the studies of women in the Southeast Asia. When you were studying about the women of the Southeast Asia, it means you are comparing the women of the Southeast Asia, right? The report was explicitly undertaken with the dual purpose of critically assessing the existing body of knowledge on the status of women in Southeast Asia, and simultaneously preparing the ground for promotion of women's studies as an academic discipline both in region and globally. And this, why this project has been carried out, this project has been carried out for two purposes. First is to assess the existing body of knowledge on the status of women. That is, they want to understand the body of knowledge, how much knowledge we have about the status of women in Southeast Asia. And secondly, that is, they want to prepare a ground for promotion of the women's studies as an academic discipline. Her interest in using the comparative method to study women in South Asia, right, was further consolidated in her book on women and kinship, perspective on gender in South and Southeast Asia. Through exploring kinship systems and family organization and their impact on inheritance, resource distribution, female sexuality, seclusion of women, bodily processes, living spaces, marriage, nutrition, and education, she brings out in detail the differences and similarities among the everyday lives of women living in these region. Right, when she was studying the women of the Southeast Asia, right, she explored the kinship system, the family organization, and the impact of this kinship system and family organization on the inheritance, seclusion of women, bodily process, living spaces, marriage, nutrition, and education. And through these variables, she tried to bring out the detail the differences and the similarities among the everyday lives of the various societies of Southeast Asia. Towards the end, she concludes that it is the concept of bilaterality in Southeast Asia that enshrines the principle of flexibility, and it accepts the hierarchies of age, seniority, and class rather than gender. This makes the position of women in Southeast Asia stronger. Right? uh, this is a concept of bilaterality in Southeast Asia. There is a concept of bilaterality in Southeast Asia, right? And because of this, there is a principle of flexibility, right? And these societies accepts the hierarchies of age, seniority, and the class rather than the gender, right? And because they consider the hierarchies of age, seniority, and class important than the gender, this makes the position of women in Southeast Asia stronger. Right? Construction of gender. In an important article on the construction of gender, Hindu girls in patrilineal India, Dubey traces the mechanism through which girls develop a gendered identity by examining the rituals, ceremonies, language, and practices in family. So there is an article that is on construction of gender, how gender has been constructed. That is on construction of gender. Hindu girls in patrilineal India. This is the name of the article on the construction of gender. Hindu girls in patrilineal India. In this, Dubey traces the mechanism through which the girls develop the gendered identity. Right? She tried to understand the mechanism through which the girls develop their gendered identity. Right, how she tried to traces the mechanism, that is by examining the rituals, ceremonies, languages, and practices of families. She explains this by using seed and earth analogy. This analogy has been examined by her in several other papers, and it is very important in understanding the gender relations. This concept is extremely powerful and has been extensively discussed in the women's studies in the by gendered identity by using seed and earth analogy, and this analogy has been used, has been discussed in the women's studies in various places. The reason for the secondary status given to women comes from the understanding of women passive receptacles. Men provides the seed, the essence, while the women provides the field which receives the seeds and nourishes it. Because it has been considered that men provides the seeds and women receives those seeds and nourishes those seeds. So because of this, the women has been given the secondary status, because they just receive and nourishes the seeds, and it is the men who gives the seeds. A child shares the father's blood. Within the natal group of women, transferability and non-functional nature is empathized, while within the marital family, her instrumentality is emphasized. The child share the father's blood, as we all know that we say that the child shares the father's blood. Within the natal group of women, transferability and non-functional nature is empathized, while within the marital family, her instrumentality is emphasized. Right. This unequal social arrangement is perceived as arrangement of nature, which gives different roles to men and women in procreation. Structure and kinship, which makes rule about the recruitment, marital residence, rearrangement of family. These in turn are impacted by the institutions of caste. So, as per Leela Dubé, there is a unequal social arrangement, and this social arrangement, unequal social arrangement, is perceived as an arrangement of nature, right? And that gives a different roles to the men and the women in procreation, right? Right, because it has been considered that the men gives the seeds and women just nourishes that seed, right? So according to this, this nature has created this unequal division, and because of this, the nature has provided different roles to the men and women in procreation. So this unequal social arrangement is perceived on the basis of the nature, right? Then Sheila Dubé explains how gender roles are lived out in terms of family structure, kinship system, and other organization, right? And this was further impacted by the caste system, right? She explains that one of the reasons the constraints are placed on the female sexuality is because their future is tied to being a wife and mother. As we all know that there are certain constraints, right? That there are certain constraints placed on the female sexuality, and it is because their future is tied to being the wife and a mother. Motherhood is the highest achievement in women's life. Marriage is the gateway of motherhood. Everything else is secondary to these two goals. As per our society, right? Motherhood is the highest achievement in women's life. If someone is a mother, that is the highest achievement in women's life, and marriage is a gateway to that motherhood, right? Everything else is secondary to these two goals in women's life. This is the reason why there is a constraint placed on the female sexuality, because their future is tied to be mother and wife, right? Socialization of girls was also impacted by the idea of women as a gatekeeper of caste, as a boundary marker. She was one of the first scholars to introduce this idea, and use this to explain violence against women as well. So she was the one who studied the women in this aspect, right? So, as per Leela Dubé, that motherhood is the highest achievement. The society considers that motherhood is one highest achievement in any woman's life, and the gateway of motherhood lies and marriage is the gateway of motherhood. So, because of this, they put constraint on the female sexuality, and then the socialization of girl was also impacted by the idea of women as a gatekeeper of a caste. We conceive, though we socialize the girls in a way that we consider them as a gatekeeper of the caste, right? And as a boundary maker. So she was the one of the first scholars to introduce this idea, and she used it to explain the violence against the women as well. According to her, women as a boundary markers become repositories of honor, such that violence against women was outcome when social hierarchies were threatened. Because because the socialization of the girls was impacted by the caste system, and they considered the girls are considered as a gatekeeper of the caste, and this has been this is one of the reason for the violence against the women. And as per Leela Dubey, this because women we consider the women as the boundary markers, they become the repositories of honor, because we the honor of the family, society, caste, this burden lies on the women only. So according to Leela Dubey, these women become the repositories of the honor, and that the violence against women was an outcome when the social hierarchies were threatened. The other aspect of violence against women that Leela Dubey engaged with vigorously was a debate about the sex selective abortion, right? Because the burden of the honor of the society, family lies on the shoulder of the women, and this and because of this, they become and this results in the violence against the women. And the second aspect which is responsible for the violence against women is, according to the Leela Dubey, is the sex selective abortions. In her responses, interesting insight about preferences of a particular child, example from the different countries in the South Asia. She explained the practices of female infanticides in the different society and its implications, such as practices of polyandry because of less number of women, abduction of women, and so on. So, because she studied the church, that is the child selective abortion, and um, um, she studied about the implications of this female infanticides in the different society, and this resulted in the polyandry because of the less number of females available, and this resulted in the abduction of the women, and so on. And again, this is again a violence against women. This debate also strengthened was an anthropologist, right? And her work, that is, her work is based on the women studies, and she is the one who laid down a ground for women studies as an academic discipline, right? And she held various important positions during her lifetime. Ramakrishna Mukherjee. The next sociologist is Ramakrishna Mukherjee. Mukherjee was one of the few social scientists in India who consistently and fruitfully applied the Marxist concept and method in appraising the social reality. It means he was influenced by Marx, and he applied the Marxist concepts and method in appraising the social realities. He laid bare the stark reality of exploitation of subjugated people of Africa and India by colonial powers of West. So he tried to explain the harsh realities of exploitation of working class of the people of Africa and India by the dominated or the colonial powers of the West. He threw light on the development of the classes and class contradiction in the societies of India and other places. He strongly advocated the adoption of conflict approach in place of consensual approach, right? Studying the social structure and processes. As he was influenced by the Marx, so he advocated for adoption of the conflict method rather than the consensual method, right? Or rather than the consensual approach in studying the social structure and processes. Ramakrishna Mukherjee was born in Jessore in erstwhile Bangladesh on November 7, 1917. Mukherjee obtained school education from Ripon Collegiate School and the Mitra Institution. He did his MSc in anthropology from University of Calcutta with human genetics as a special paper. He did PhD on physical characteristics of ancient inhabitants of Jebel Moya, Sudan. His work was on biometry and not on anthropology. During 1948 and 49, Ramakrishna Mukherjee came in close contact with a member of French Communist Party. At Cambridge, Mukherjee attended classes on economic history. At Cambridge, again Mukherjee came in contact with the Rajni Palmdutt of Communist Party of Great Britain. Both Dobb and Dutt had modeled Mukherjee into Marxist frame of thoughts. So whatever he wrote, whether on peasantry, village stratification, or family of India, or any other part of the globe, particularly of communist country, was touched with leftist leaning. So her writings were touched with the leftist leaning. He was also engaged with the work on the colonized countries like Uganda. 3 books: The Rise and Fall of East India Company, Dynamics of Rural Society, and The Problem of Uganda were published during her stay in Humboldt University in East Berlin from 1953 to 1957 as a professor of Indian Studies. Mukherjee returned to India in 1957 as a professor of sociology at Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta. He was trying to form a sociological research unit at ISI. He was a prolific writer and published The Sociologist and Social Changes in India Today, West Bengal Family Structure and Social Indicator from 1965 to 75. Between 1977 to 1980, he published Sociology of Indian Sociology and What Will It Be? The central ideas of Mukherjee: social forces behind the rise and falls of East India Company. In East India Company in 1955, Mukherjee used the Marxist concept of primitive accumulation in analyzing the historical data about change in the society, the economy of India, which were bought by regime of East India Company. Then rural economy and the society, right? Another book, Mukherjee's 6 Villages of Bengal, is a study on the relationship existing between the village on the one hand and the wider economic structure on the other hand. All the 6 villages are from the erstwhile East Pakistan. Of the 6 villages chosen, 5 were in the interior part, while 6th one was near to the town. The villages had similar kind of physical characteristics: arable land, huts, tanks, etc. And the population consisted of the people from Hindu and Muslim communities. Mukherjee discussed the religious group of the villages and also their administrative organized. East Pakistan, right? So he gives an account of the different caste groups in the villages, and shows the interrelationship between the groups, if there is any interrelationship, intermarriages between the two caste group, if there exist some intermarriages, the nature of the family, the relationship existing between the villages and the local union boards, and the police station and the district board. He also gives the detailed account of the kind of the food the villagers and dress they wear, the type of the diseases they suffer from, and the festival in and around the villages. So he studied about 6 villages that he did studied. He has done a detailed study about the 6 villages, right? So the village community in India, particularly in Bengal, was not an unchanging social entity. It kept on changing, and village community in Bengal was not an undifferentiated or egalitarian social system. Differentiation and inequality were found, right? So village community in India, particularly in Bengal, they were changing entities. They kept on changing, and they were not same. They were different, right? There is a differentiation and inequalities were found among the villages. Indeed, the social aspect of the caste division and economic aspect of the production relationship revealed in unequal access to different groups to land and other economic resources are intertwined. On the basis of the sample survey of rural population, right, Mukherjee found that the existence of 3 classes, which have already been discussed in the 6 villages, right? Sociology of Indian sociology is in Mukherjee's word a preliminary but necessary attempt to understand the development of Indian sociology. That is sociology of Indian sociology. It is to understand the development of Indian sociology. Learning about the Indian society started from the Vedic period, and the book tries to give an account of entire history of Indian sociology. He divided the history of this development into 2 phases: pre-sociological period and the sociological period. Sociology and society. Sociology, what is sociology? Sociology is the science of this society, and society could be conceived of complex whole individual and group who are systematically integrated to in terms of their actions and interactions, social behavior and social relationships. The whole is organized and sustained process leads to the emergence, motivating agencies of social institutions. Social institution consolidated the individual within the system of material and immaterial thing. So, in short, this Mukherjee was influenced with Marx, right? He wrote the books. He studied about the sociology of Indian sociology, how Indian sociology has been developed, right? So he divided the era into 2: the pre-sociological era and the sociological era, right? He studied about the rural areas of. He has tried to study and compare and contrast the rural lifestyle, or the rural society of the India, rural society. For this, he had taken into account the 6 villages, right? Five are of the similar type, and the sixth one was near to the try to he compared and contrast the living standards, the food habits, and other things. Time. So there, as per Mukherjee, that society changes, but it remains in the dynamic equilibrium, right? There are the various configuration or the forms of the society, right? They maintain their identity at any point of time. How they maintain their identity? That is that they maintain their identity and they change between themselves and over a period of time. That's all for today. Thank you very much. Namaskar.